All right. Welcome again, everyone, and thank you so much. Uh, we are about to start the Wow and How of Shareholder Season, a guide for activists. And we're doing this through Stop the Money Pipeline, and we're very grateful to them, but also to all of our speakers and all of our tech monitors and chat monitors. And we'll be ready to go in just a couple seconds. Twin Cities, we have Brookline, Massachusetts, Michigan, Albuquerque. All right, here we go. Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us for the Wow and How of Shareholder Season. My name is Mary Cerulli, and I'm with Climate Finance Action.
And I'm Erica Taylor with Take on Wall Street. I'm so excited to be here today because I run our popular education program, so I know how many everyday people are looking for ways to challenge the financial elite and make an economy that works for all of us. And I believe that we have to use all the strategies that are at our disposal to combat climate chaos and to create a better future. So one of those strategies, which I think is too often overlooked, is engaging with shareholders.
Exactly, Erica. And I'm here today because I've seen the real positive impact when investors call for change at companies. And I know those investors can help us win really big on climate and human rights. The wow in our title isn't just about enticing people to join us, because this truly is an exciting period when we can really push for change.
And so Mary and I don't have to tell you why change is necessary, but we're curious. Please tell us in the chat if you think companies are truly planning for the equitable and sustainable world that everyone deserves. So just throw a yay or nay, yes or no in the chat.
They're
all right, seeing like, nope, nay, oh, hell no, all right. all right. So I think there's some, probably not. It tends to be the predominant response. Now give a shout out in the chat if you think more companies should be taking on this critical responsibility. Yes, all right.
Wow. We have some good participation here. I love you guys. But you know what? The folks that put money into big business want to know if corporations are paying attention to the risks of climate change as well. All of us climate activists understand what it means to show up in force, to protest pipelines and call for indigenous rights and the end of sacrifice zones. We are really well practiced at standing up to power of complex systems. We have these muscles already, and today we're going to learn how to use them in a different way.
Exactly. So right now, investors are assessing climate, lobbying, and inequity issues at big corporations, and all of us can help shape the outcomes of those decisions made in those rooms. So we have a phenomenal set of speakers today who are going to help us figure that out. So they are Eli Kassergut-Staub with Majority Action, Pat Tomaino with Zevin Asset Management, Moira Burse with Amazon Watch, Debbie New and Susie Drury with Climate Finance Action, and Gaurav Madan with Friends of the Earth.
And today we are going to learn, but we're also going to take action. We're going to hear about what winning looks like. And yes, there have been really significant wins. We're going to look at the big investors that are responsible for the retirement savings of teachers, unions, and workers. And we're going to look at companies where we can target them together. And we're going to take action. And that's going to be the fun part. We're going to take action today and in the next couple of months and beyond.
Excellent. And we're all here today because we agree that business as usual is over. We demand change. Shareholders must fight for climate justice. And now we're going to turn it over to Majority Action's Eli Kassergut-Staub, who will walk us through what it looks like when we win.
Hello, everybody. I am so honored to be here with you all. And so thankful to Mary and to Erica and to the entire Climate Finance Action and Stop the Money Pipeline crew for pulling together this incredible gathering here. I want to just step back together for a minute, because as long as there has been a fossil fuel industry, it has always been deeply bound up with the finance sector. Banks lend money to keep polluting operations going. Investors buy stock in new drilling companies. Shareholders vote to approve CEO pay packages, no matter how much coal or gas a company uses. Even today, 65% of the people who sit on boards of directors of large global banks have some connection to polluting sectors. So if you're joining us here for this Action Hour today, you already know two things. Number one, you already know that if we're going to confront global warming, we have to stop companies from making it worse. And that to do that, we have to go where the money and power is. And number two, you already know that the finance and the fossil fuel sectors aren't just going to separate themselves. We have to pull them apart. So let's take a case in point. For many, many decades, the largest oil company, ExxonMobil, and the largest fossil fuel financier in the world, JP Morgan Chase, had been joined at the hip at the highest levels, with executives from one serving on the boards of the other. For over 30 years, Lee Raymond, the CEO and chair of ExxonMobil, and the architect of Exxon's notorious climate denial strategy, and arguably the corporate leader most singularly responsible for setting back US climate policy for decades. That guy, Lee Raymond, sat on the board of JP Morgan Chase. And as calls for banks to decarbonize grew, the fact that Lee Raymond, architect of Exxon climate denial strategy, was literally in charge of the board at JP Morgan Chase just became completely untenable. But here's the good news, which is that shareholders have so much power to transform company behavior. And when we raise our voices, we can help unlock that power on scale. So we launched this campaign in early 2020, Majority Action, together with organizations across this amazingly powerful Stop the Money Pipeline network, calling for Raymond to be thrown off the board of JP Morgan Chase. In February of last year, tens of thousands of grassroots activists took action, publicly demanding that he be removed and engaging with leading investors around the country about the danger of his ongoing presence. Then when the company renominated him to the board in April of last year, leading investors responded to the call of the moment and took up the charge. Scott Stringer, the New York City comptroller, stepped out and called on JP Morgan Chase shareholders to oppose Raymond's reelection. New York State, CalPERS, 9 state treasurers all stepped out and declared their opposition to his candidacy. And as momentum grew and grew, JP Morgan folded under pressure and announced that Lee Raymond would finally, after 3 decades, be leaving the board. So this campaign won more than just Raymond's removal and achieved more than the ratcheting up of the pressure on JP Morgan, all of which contributed to the company committing to align its financing to the goals of the Paris Agreement, which now we all get to force them to live up to. No, the campaign also showed that the finance sectors and the fossil fuel industry can be pulled apart, and that shareholder action coupled with people power, grassroots organizing, can drive that forward. And that's just one of the major breakthroughs we've had in the last year. Let's look at HSBC, one of the largest banks and fossil fuel financiers in the world. Our partners in the UK, Share Action, a people-powered shareholder activist organization, won a breakthrough commitment from HSBC to end coal financing. At Procter & Gamble, after 2 years of relentless grassroots pressure on its largest shareholders, namely BlackRock, which together with Vanguard and State Street, BlackRock controls an unprecedented 25% of the voting power across the S&P 500, those 3 shareholders alone. BlackRock voted for a shareholder resolution at Procter & Gamble, demanding on accountability on deforestation, helping push that to majority support for the very first time. And at Duke Energy, one of the largest and dirtiest electric power companies, which had been harboring a known climate denier with a horrible track record of racist harm on its board of directors. His name is Daniel DeRico. After 2 years of grassroots activists shining a spotlight on his horrible track record, the company dumped him on the side of the road after my organization exposed his support for the Capitol insurrection. And all of this is just getting started. Shareholders have so much power to transform company behavior, and there are so many opportunities this shareholder season to exercise that power on scale, all of which will be more powerful with grassroots energy behind it. And with that, Mary, I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Eli. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I hear Eli, I get so pumped up. So we got the big picture. Now let's look at the basics with two fundamental questions. While I'm talking, you'll see Sarah from Ink Factory creating visual notes. They will be synthesizing our words into images and text. We are so fortunate to have her here with us for this webinar. So the two questions: what is a shareholder and what is shareholder season? Let's set the stage. We are talking about public companies that are causing harm to the planet and human rights abuses. While many private companies are owned by individuals, public companies are owned mostly by stockholders or shareholders. Shareholders are investors. So take just a couple seconds and in the chat, please let us know what comes to mind when you think of the word investor. Don't be shy, just put those things in the chat. Someone big and rich, come on, Wall Street, yeah, money, banks, stockbroker, my dad. Yeah, look at all these. You're totally right. And there's other ones too. There's huge shareholders as well that we'll look at later. So these shareholders own shares in a public company, meaning they invest in a company, and so they own part of that company, and they get a share of the profit. All public companies have to follow certain rules. And one of those rules is that they are required to have an annual meeting of their shareholders. Most companies have these meetings in the spring. Shareholder season is a concentrated time when shareholders make big decisions about big business. The media is watching, socially responsible investing firms are watching, and corporations are really paying attention this year. Shareholder season is a huge opportunity for us to demand that the biggest shareholders stop siding with corporate executives and act on climate justice. So today we're talking about the largest shareholders that have outsized investor power. Some of the truly huge shareholders are asset management companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and Fidelity. Some are pension funds that are made up of workers' retirement savings. If you know a teacher, state or municipal worker, or union member, those are the folks that are dependent upon the state's retirement fund. Asset managers and pension funds vote on behalf of the people and organizations whose money they manage. These big shareholders have a lot of power over how companies are run and what they do. We're forcing change on fossil fuel companies like Exxon, utilities that are selling us dirty energy like Duke, and banks like JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo that fund fossil fuel and deforestation companies, as well as food companies that are at the root of deforestation and human rights abuses like Bunge. We know that our elected officials are accountable to us as their constituents. Similarly, companies answer to their shareholders. Just like we can vote for our elected officials out of office, shareholders can vote corporate directors out of power. And just like there are ballot initiatives that we all vote on, shareholders can vote for important company actions like climate, political lobbying, and equity issues. So annual company meetings are the time when shareholders weigh in on how a company does business by voting for or against changes. When we vote for our representatives, nobody knows who we vote for. But here's the opportunity. When big shareholders vote, it's public. Shareholder season is a big opportunity for us. Key decisions are made now. And now people are watching because climate, racial justice, and diversity have been called out as big financial risks. Business as usual is over. We are demanding the change the world needs. Shareholders must vote for climate justice. Shareholders must stop rubber stamping directors of companies who have done nothing on climate and justice for decades. We will make them walk their talk. Shareholders need a good, strong push. They have a seat at the table, but haven't used it the right way. Now is the time to escalate. And I will pass this to Pat Tomeno. He's the Director of Social Responsible Investing at Zevin Asset Management, a firm that has distinguished itself in environmental, social, and corporate governance analysis and action. Pat's a super social activist himself. Take it away, Pat.
Hi, thank you, Mary. It's good to be with everyone. I'm Pat Tomeno at Zevin Asset Management. Our clients want to be responsible investors. So on their behalf, I show up to companies in their portfolio and I demand change on key climate change, human rights, and racial justice issues, also worker rights as well. In that process, I file a lot of those shareholder proposals, submit them to companies that Mary referred to in order to turn up the heat on company boards and executives. And it's just as Mary says, shareholder season is a special time of year. The shareholder meeting is a period of intense media focus on these companies. And it's one of the only times a year when we stakeholders can confront the board and the senior executive team. Companies can be put on the spot legally and in the court of public opinion in ways that you just can't do in other times of the year. Take ExxonMobil. Years ago, our firm, Zevin Asset Management, was helping scientists from the Union of Concerned Scientists enter the shareholder meeting of that oil giant and challenge the board directly. Fast forward to this year, and climate conscious activist investors are leading a credible challenge to put their own directors on the board of Exxon. So this is a time of opportunity. But a few key things have to happen in order to make real change during shareholder season. Shareholder proposals can make a dent, but the actions of the largest investors, the biggest investors, are key. Big asset managers like Vanguard and BlackRock own the vast majority of the Fortune 500, and they hold the keys to corporate change. They own America. In 2018, my firm joined with a group called Ceres to challenge Kinder Morgan. They're a big pipeline company, to conduct a 2-degree scenario climate report. We were on our way to getting kind of a ho-hum vote, but then we finally convinced Vanguard and some other large public pension funds to vote for the proposal. Not other large pension funds, some large pension funds. Vanguard's a private outfit. That gave us, so when we convinced Vanguard to vote for our proposal, that gave us the majority vote we needed. They're such a big investor, and that forced the company's hand, and within a year, they had to complete the requested report. That's just the first step, but it was good progress at a company that really didn't want to do what we were asking. We were able to do that behind closed doors. We convinced Vanguard to vote for our proposal, but you know what would help a lot in that conversation? Leverage, the grassroots, pushing on Vanguard and speaking directly to its conscience to vote the right way. So a majority vote, like we had with Kinder Morgan, can be helpful, but they're not everything, and they're still not very common. In most cases, proposals receive 20 or 30% support. We don't win in that year, obviously, but we're still looking to create leverage to change company policy. And here are the actions. The actions of activists are so important. You create media attention and really focus the board of directors on the change that they need to make, no matter what the vote total is. This was really clear in my shareholder proposal recently at Google. We were asking for a diversity and inclusion action on their part. The shareholder proposal was getting ignored, basically, until we investors joined with current employees and other grassroots folks, community members who were facing issues in their workplace. And that's when we received huge press attention, and the campaign for change was really strengthened. Google had to make some changes. They do more executive oversight about some things. They still got to do a lot more. But it was only because we investors, the folks in suits, joined with grassroots people who are actually affected by the corporate behavior that we were able to make that change and get that attention. So that's due to people like you in this room right now. And I just really am grateful for it.
Hey, thanks a lot, Pat. That's great. That's great to hear. And I believe Moira Briss is up next to talk about the big asset managers. She's the climate and finance director of Amazon Watch, and really just a wonderful person and a smarty pants too. Take it away, Moira.
Thanks. And my last name is Burse, not Briss. Folks will know I want to make that correction.
I know, I'm a little nervous.
No
I'm a
worries,
little
Mary.
nervous, so I pronounced it wrong.
That's
Oh,
okay. It's just that the mispronunciation can be misunderstood. Both Mary and Pat have talked about asset managers like BlackRock and Vanguard, but I want to take a step back and help explain what is an asset manager. So an asset manager is a company that invests other people's money. They make money by charging their clients for their investment services. Asset managers invest in thousands of companies, including ones that are wrecking the planet and perpetuating injustice. So what exactly do asset managers do? So asset managers invest on behalf of others. The usual expectation is that they invest so that your money grows over time. Their clients or customers are individuals who have money to invest, as well as institutions or funds with big pots of money, like university endowments and pension funds where many workers save for retirement. Asset managers are expected to act in the best interests of all the people whose money they're responsible for managing. Here's the problem. Many of the people whose money they're investing don't actually know where their money is going and what it's supporting. And a lot of that money is pouring into climate damaging companies like ExxonMobil and Enbridge, who's responsible for pipeline projects like Line 3. So who exactly are these asset managers? The asset managers we're talking about are giant corporations. We're specifically talking about what are known as the big three because they have such outsized power. The big three are BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. The big three have enormous power because they manage a lot of money. They are the world's largest investors with more than 18.5 trillion, and I said trillion with a T, in assets under management. So to wrap our heads around what that even means, let's just think about $1 trillion. Okay, you'd have to spend $27,378,507.90 every day for 100 years to actually spend $1 trillion. Now times that by 18.5. Okay, and that's how much money the big three invest. So that means the big three have a lot of power when it comes to climate, right? We know that money is power in this world. And the big three can use that power to push companies to do things or to stop doing things. So that's what we mean when we say shareholder or investor power. And because these asset managers pool money from people, institutions around the world, they are the top shareholders in most big companies. So they can push a company to do better if they choose to use that power. So let's talk about BlackRock, the biggest of the big three. So exactly how big is BlackRock? BlackRock invests nearly $9 trillion, and that's that T again, 9 trillion. That means that it would be the third largest economy in the world after the US and China. And so if BlackRock takes action on climate and justice issues, we will see a huge impact fast. BlackRock is everywhere, all over the world, on every continent, making billions of dollars each year. And because BlackRock is so big, it can make a huge difference and prompt many other companies to follow its lead. So what exactly can BlackRock do? One thing that BlackRock can do is vote, right? And we're not talking about voting in an election, like a presidential election or anything here. We're talking about voting for or against changes at companies where BlackRock is a shareholder. Every shareholder season, BlackRock votes on whether or not the companies it invests in should change their practices. And BlackRock votes on whether or not the directors of a company should keep their jobs or be replaced by others who will take action on climate and justice. So if just BlackRock and Vanguard voted for climate critical changes, in almost all cases, those votes would pass. But the fact is, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are failing right now. For years, they've been supporting business as usual and ignoring the climate crisis. Last shareholder season, BlackRock voted against climate critical actions over 90% of the time. So what now? The good news is BlackRock has a very big mouth, okay? It recently has said very publicly that it might start voting in favor of climate resolutions and against directors of companies that are lagging on climate action. BlackRock made a lot of headlines when it said that. Now, though, it has to actually do what it said it was going to do. Will its actions actually match its words? Well, that's where we come in. We have to demand that BlackRock votes for climate. So starting now through the end of shareholder season, we need to keep the pressure up. We need to let BlackRock hear loud and clear that we're watching and we expect action. And after shareholder season, there'll be more to do when we find out exactly how BlackRock voted and if it really took action. So for now, it's all eyes on BlackRock. And now we're going to watch a short video with voices and perspectives from Indigenous peoples around the world about the impacts of BlackRock's investments on their communities and ecosystems and their calls for real action.
BlackRock. Climate change is not simply a risk to be calculated in terms of profit margins. It is a constant stream of risk to our people and our planet.
Mientras BlackRock se comprometió a pedir a las empresas que reduzcan las emisiones en el futuro, nuestros bosques están siendo destruidos, nuestras tierras están siendo robadas y nuestra gente está siendo asesinada.
Krisis yang terjadi saat ini adalah hasil dari rasisme eksploitasi dan penjajahan selama berabad-abad.
Tidak ada cara untuk mengatasi dampak perubahan iklim dari investasimu tanpa menghargai hak-hak masyarakat adat dan komunitas lokal. Sains telah membuktikan bahwa mendukung hak teritorial kita menjaga tegakkan hutan.
Así que por favor, díganos, ¿qué medidas van a tomar para que sus inversiones dejen de violar los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y atacar a nuestras comunidades? El mundo está mirando.
Thank you, Moira, and thank you to everybody who made that video. I know we have people here from Friends of the Earth today. We're part of that as well. I'm really glad we could all see that. So beautiful and powerful. My name is Debbie New, and I am from Climate Finance Action, and I've asked Susie to help me explain one of the most powerful ways we can put a lot of pressure on BlackRock. So Susie and I will tell you about it.
Hi there.
So we've just heard a lot about the outsized power of asset managers, especially BlackRock. But who has power over BlackRock? Who can push BlackRock to start taking action on climate? Well, guess what? BlackRock itself has told us. Let me introduce Larry. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. Larry has said that climate activists who've been protesting at BlackRock, that's us, need to go to the money owners and talk to them and have them change.
Okay, Debbie, so what does he mean by money owner?
Well, think of Larry like the manager of a car dealership. It's as if he's saying, I can't make that deal. I'm just the manager. You've got to talk to the owner.
Oh, right. Okay, that play. I've got it now.
So when Larry says, go to the money owners, he means the people who have influence over huge pots of money, the biggest pots of money and the biggest customers that BlackRock and other asset managers care about. And in the US, these are city and state pension funds.
Well, how big are they?
They are really big. Together, all the state pension funds in the US are worth nearly $4 trillion with a T.
Wow. Okay. So these are pension funds, are the retirement savings of people like teachers, firefighters, social service workers. Is that right?
Right. And here's the thing. These funds are overseen by your state treasurer.
I think of a treasurer as like sort of a boring job, like the person who counts the money, but this sounds different and more important than that.
Exactly. Your state treasurer has responsibility for this huge pot of money and can have a lot of influence over how it gets invested. Sometimes the treasurer has all the power, in some states not, but they all have significant influence. And here's another thing. State treasurers are elected in most states. You might think of them as the most powerful climate officials that you've never heard of. They are the money owners that Larry Fink listens to. Just last year, a bunch of state treasurers boosted the successful effort against Lee Raymond that you heard about from Eli earlier. Lee Raymond, that former Exxon CEO and historic climate denier.
So I count only 9 states here on this slide.
Right. Most state treasurers are not using their power. They need to use it. As their constituents, we can push them. But don't just take my word for it. The treasurer of New York City, also called a comptroller, essentially the same thing, clearly understands his responsibility and his power when it comes to climate. Watch.
In my role as comptroller, I manage a pension fund of $200 billion. It's the 4th largest in the United States, the 14th largest in the world. It's an elected position, so part of your job is to represent all of your constituents. And when you own shares in a company, you expect that company to have a strong reputation and a strong vision for the value of that company. It is pretty clear to every expert that the climate deniers cannot make an argument for continuing to invest in outdated fossil fuel industry, outdated fracking industry, pipelines, and the like. My first job is to protect the people I represent. So who's that? It's the teacher, the firefighter, the people whose pensions I protect for their family's future. And while I'm doing this work, I also want to make sure that we're protecting their families and their children by creating a greener and safer world and getting rid of the fossil fuels that have polluted our earth and are turning out to be the worst investment you can make. Treasurers and controllers around the country can play a very significant role, like state attorney generals, because we can leverage in a fiduciary way the pension funds to do good and protect people's investment. And actually, it's the same thing in my view. I would not be doing my job if I was not questioning the fossil fuel investments these companies are making, or the fossil fuel deniers that continue to be on these boards. And treasurers and controllers can play a major part in climate change in this country.
Right. So as Stringer says, it's a huge risk for pension funds to be invested in fossil fuels. Our state treasurers are stewards of this money and should be holding BlackRock and others accountable for these risky investments.
So what I'm hearing is that all of these treasurers could do a lot more than they're doing.
Yes, some are already taking action, but we can get them to do more and enlist others.
So how do we get involved in making this happen?
Well, there's a link that I hope is going in the chat now to a super short Google form you can use to let us know what city and state you're in so that we can follow up with you. There's work moving on this front in multiple states, and we could really use more hands on deck. So there's the link in the chat. Now, Eli, who spoke earlier, and Gaurav from Friends of the Earth are going to take turns helping us get really specific about what we can all push for this shareholder season. And before I turn it over to them, I just want to say that our visual note taker has had a little internet trouble, but she's coming in and out, and hopefully she'll stay with us now and we'll be able to see what she is visualizing that Eli and Gaurav are going to tell us about. Okay, Eli, go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes, great.
Yes, go ahead.
So today we're going to just start right at the top. about how shareholders can take action on the scale of the crisis. And starting at the top means starting with those at a corporation with the most power to set its agenda and change its trajectory, which is its board of directors. The board of directors oversees the overall direction and strategy of a business. They have a lot of power because they can also hire or fire the CEO. And at large companies, people on these boards generally get elected every year. So shareholders effectively have the power to set corporate policy because they elect who is in the boardroom every year and what they should be doing with themselves while they're there. Shareholders get to say to corporate directors, look, either you lead your company responsibly, or we can replace you with leaders who will. And when shareholders kick out directors, it can completely change the direction of a company. So for years, shareholders in the US have been trying to push companies on climate and other issues through private dialogue, filing shareholder resolutions, both of which have been important and in cases have led to real breakthroughs, but neither of which have been strong enough alone to force change at the scale we need it with the worst, most recalcitrant actors. Ousting directors is the strongest move that shareholders can make to hold a company accountable. And with the climate crisis growing, centuries of racial injustice calling out for action, and companies failing to act, it's long past time for this kind of escalation. Now, thanks to grassroots power and investor leadership, in recent years, a few directors have been voted out of power because of their climate denial or inaction, or have otherwise lost their roles. As I mentioned, just last year, we ousted Lee Raymond, the former CEO of ExxonMobil. And as I alluded to earlier, we helped usher out this climate denier with a track record of racism at Duke Energy as well. We want to make taking on directors like these the norm, and you can help. Back to you, Mary.
Thanks, Eli. I think I'll jump in here and just talk a little bit about what a shareholder resolution is. So this year we'll be looking at votes that the big three, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street and other asset managers will be making to vote off directors. We'll also be looking at how they're going to vote on shareholder resolutions. So what is a shareholder resolution? Every year, shareholders can submit proposals, also known as resolutions, to change how a company does business. These resolutions can address environmental, human rights, or social justice issues that are risks to the long-term success of a company. Such resolutions are important because they highlight ongoing bad practices in companies' operations and place pressure on companies to change. Now, for large asset managers like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, voting in favor of a shareholder resolution is one way they can pressure companies and live up to their climate commitments. We just heard about how big these Wall Street giants are. Given their size and the fact that they own shares in most publicly listed companies, a comprehensive shareholder voting approach can move companies and entire industries. This is especially true when asset managers like BlackRock are one of the top shareholders in a company. BlackRock is such a big investor that in many cases, their vote alone can be the difference if a vote passes or doesn't. Now, shareholder resolutions are not binding, but if resolutions receive more than 50% of votes, there is an expectation from shareholders that the resolution will be implemented. For BlackRock and other mass asset managers who have made climate commitments, shareholder voting should be one part of a multi-pronged strategy. It is not the only thing they should be doing, but if done right, shareholder voting can complement other strategies to force companies to shift their operations from destroying our planet and endangering our peoples. Now, BlackRock has talked a big game on how they're going to center climate in their investment strategy, but their actions haven't met the scale of their rhetoric, let alone the crisis we are facing. Ultimately, BlackRock must shift its financing away from companies and industries that are consistently driving climate chaos and human rights violations. But Eli, can you tell us a bit more about some of the big director votes this year we are watching?
Absolutely. So my organization, Majority Action, has published a list of director votes at 20 companies in critical industries that are demonstrably failing on climate change: electric power, oil and gas, and the finance sector. We call this initiative proxy voting for a 1.5 degree world. And our goal is to try to create a fundamental shift in how these directors are held accountable, so that they're actually held accountable for their current actions, whether or not they are aligning their companies to where they need to go, not just their personal biographies or histories of climate denialism. Now, most of these directors at these companies have been rubber stamped year after year by major shareholders like BlackRock, even though they've been failing to do what's needed on climate change. We would never vote for elected officials who are failing us like this. And just like that, corporate directors should have to earn the right to re-election as well. So this initiative highlights 20 companies that are egregious. A link is in the chat. And there are more than just those 20, but these 20 really encapsulate the range of issues. Today, I just want to lift up 3 for everybody here. Number 1, Wells Fargo, one of the largest fossil fuel financiers. It's not even committed to the world-leading standard for measuring and disclosing their own financed emissions. That's like saying you're committed to losing 20 pounds, but not even being willing to get on the scale to see how much you weigh today. They're also fighting back against calls to undertake a long overdue racial equity audit. Completely unacceptable. Number 2, Duke Energy, one of the largest and dirtiest electric power companies. It got an F from the Sierra Club for its failure to close dirty coal plants and its plans to build out lots of new natural gas that no one needs. Duke's board of directors is led by a man named Michael Browning, who's been on the board of Duke and its predecessors for over 30 years. We are never going to get off of fossil fuels with fossilized leadership like that. And number 3, ExxonMobil, the granddaddy of them all, the worst corporate climate denier in US history. Its board is finally facing a long overdue challenge from leading investors who are trying to replace several board members with leaders who can actually help the company embrace this clean energy transition. There are multiple directors there who have to go. And in 2021, their time should be up. Now, BlackRock has promised that they're going to improve their shareholder voting this year. These key director votes at these 20 companies are going to be a critical test of whether they're serious and will empower all of us to measure and hold them accountable for their performance. And now, Gaurav, back to you to tell us about a really important shareholder resolution on deforestation that deserves everyone's support.
That's right. So this year, one of the key shareholder votes we will be watching is at Bunge, a US-based agribusiness company linked to widespread deforestation and related human rights abuses across its supply chains all over the world. Now, every year we watch in horror and outrage as forest fires decimate some of the world's last standing forests from the Amazon to Indonesia. Bunge's operations, including producing soy in Brazil, which is largely used for animal feed, and palm oil in Indonesia, which appears in everything from bath soaps and shampoos to cookies and cakes. Both geographies are deforestation hotspots, the second largest contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions responsible for the climate crisis. In both supply chains, soy and palm oil are tied to violations of indigenous peoples and local communities' rights. Now, if the Bunge resolution passes, it will show we are winning. Last year, for the very first time ever, BlackRock voted in favor of a shareholder resolution on deforestation. The resolution, which was filed at Procter & Gamble, passed with 67% of the vote, marking the very first time a deforestation resolution passed at a major consumer company. This was because of all of us. We called and pressured BlackRock to vote the right way, and now it's time to do it again. This year, if the Bunge resolution passes, it will confirm that deforestation is now a major risk that investors are acting on. It will mark a turning of the tide and could potentially open the door for more concrete and necessary action on deforestation and climate risks. It will also allow us to directly place more pressure on companies driving the destruction of the world's last standing forests and violence and criminalization against local communities and environmental defenders. We are watching and standing in solidarity with communities all over the world to make sure BlackRock takes all the necessary steps to defund deforestation and stand up for human rights. Now, Debbie, I believe we have a message from the youth.
We do. Thanks, Gaurav and Eli. That was really important. We now have really clear targets. I'm just going to introduce Dulce Arias, who recorded a video for us last night. And I just wanted to share that I was recently reminded by her that shareholder season is a lot about choice. The choices that are made about where money is invested and choices shareholders make about who's running the show at giant corporations and whether or not they take action on climate. She reminded me about the impact of shareholder choices. Dulce is a climate justice organizer as well as a hip hop and graphic artist with Youth versus Apocalypse. She can't join us today because of work, but luckily late last night, she recorded the video that you're about to see for all of us.
Hi everyone, my name is Dulce. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am 19 years old. I'm a youth climate justice organizer with Youth versus Apocalypse, a youth-led nonprofit climate justice organization. And I'm originally from a small town in Tarasco occupied territory, also known as Michoacan, Mexico. And I was raised here in the Ohlone Stolen Land, also known as the Bay Area. And growing up with undocumented parents and myself being undocumented, it was hard for my family and I to have the resources that we needed in order to succeed. Obviously, knowing that moving to a new country is not going to be sunshine and rainbows, things were going to be hard. And they are. My family is working as hard as they can to give my siblings and I a chance for a good future. Yet, the very single thing that my family works so hard for is being threatened by companies like BlackRock, using the money under their management to contribute to the climate crisis, and constantly putting profit over the lives of people and nature. Recognizing that climate change affects everyone, the root causes of climate change and climate disasters are right now affecting at the highest rate communities that are Black, Indigenous, people of color, low-income communities, and young people, little kids younger than me. And these are the same marginalized communities who are always put to the side when important decisions are made that are literally going to affect their lives firsthand. Companies like BlackRock are not only funding private prisons, deforestation, fossil fuels, but are doing so at the expenses of people's lives, lands, and future. My family and I did not choose to move to this country. Neither did the people who got pushed out of their homes due to climate disasters. What do they get? Detention camps, kids in cages, kids disappearing. My relatives did not choose to once again fight for their land. They're always fighting for their land. And what do they get? Their land contaminated, their resources contaminated, treaties are not respected. And most of my friends did not choose to grow up living so close to an oil and gas infrastructure, yet they did. And what do they get? Asthma, nosebleeds, cancer, and the numerous of other health effects. But you know who has a choice? Shareholders, the people investing in these destructive companies. They have a choice in voting the people who are driving these companies towards climate change, towards contributing to climate change. These companies should focus on solutions for people at the forefront of the crisis instead of funding the crisis itself.
So I'm really glad to be able to share what Dulce had to say with all of you. I had a chance to talk with her myself, and I'm glad that she was able to be here with us. It's possible she's joined the webinar by now. Maybe work is over. Dulce, if you're here, let us know in the chat. But I don't know about you, but I'm fired up. I know that shareholder season is a really important opportunity for us to push for climate justice. So now we're going to choose to do something ourselves. We know that escalating action during this time is effective and more important than ever. There's a link that's going to go into the chat right now to an action that's offered by BlackRock's Big Problem. We're going to take the next handful of minutes, 5 or 8 minutes, to just to email and tweet at BlackRock. You can choose which action you want to do. When you click on the link, you'll see directions to email and tweet. If you email, your message will go to the 3 top BlackRock executives that you'll see listed, including Larry Fink himself, and to the people who make critical shareholder decisions right now. Or you can tweet at BlackRock. Whatever you do, please take a minute to add your voice and say why you're messaging them. As a follow-up after the webinar, because we can't offer a calling option right now, we'll be updating this action page with a chance to call BlackRock. So hang on to the link and keep checking back. Again, our artist Sarah will draw while we take action. So watch as what she's creating for us emerges. If you don't have enough time to take all the action you want now, no worries. You can keep going afterwards and all through shareholder season. So we'll just mute until about 2 minutes of, and then we'll come back and wrap it up. So Sarah, take it away, and let's make sure everyone has the link to take action. So maybe you can drop that in the chat. Again, thanks.
We'll be closing out in just a couple of minutes. So if you can stay on, that'd be awesome. Right, Debbie?
Yeah, I think you and Erica could do the wrap up and we can keep watching Sarah draw. Let's bring it home.
Okay, great idea. Hey, thanks everyone. There's so much good stuff going on in the chat and Q&A. But you know, Erica, if there's one thing that gets my blood going, it's speaking directly to power. And challenging BlackRock is a twofer. We demand change from big investors, and in turn, that forces change at big companies that are wrecking the planet.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I personally think today's webinar has been great, but I also worry that it won't mean a lot if we don't get out there and do something more with what we've learned. So you've already started doing that. You're doing it right now. Congratulations. But what else can you do? Well, I'm going to drop a link in your box right in the chat box right now. Or am I? Will it copy? I am. I'm going to drop. Yes. Here we are, dropping a link in your chat box right now. There we are, and we encourage you to hop on the website, the BlackRock's Big Problem campaign website, and to continue to call and email BlackRock. There's going to be one central page there, and you can use it. It's going to be updated constantly, so you'll be able to find out about other actions and ways to stay involved in shareholder season and beyond. And please remember that every single touch point matters, and repetition is our friend. So don't let up.
Hey, Erica, we have like 30 seconds, so you can go to your next meeting. We're on time. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you so much. We'll be back in touch. If you fill out the form. So it looks like we're at the top of the hour, and I just want to thank you again. Thank our speakers, our artists, and I look forward to seeing you out on the streets when we can do that kind of stuff again. Hey, panelists, why don't you come off come on the video and we'll all say bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll be sharing this picture that Sarah is in the middle of drawing. We'll share the final with you when we send a follow-up email.